The next thing we're going to talk about is digital and business models. Now, this is a huge subject, so I'm only going to give you an introduction to some of the ways digital changes things in terms of business models. And the whole point about digital is that it drives efficiencies in every block of the business model. So all of the 9 blocks can be thought about in a different way based on digital technologies. But don't get obsessed about digital technologies. The key to understanding digital technologies is the benefits and value they deliver. And a lot of company startups fail because they focus more on the technology than they do the value that their offer delivers. And often they don't understand the customer well enough to match the benefits of the technology to the value that they're trying to deliver or a customer problem. So all the way back in Module 1, we started to talk about this idea of customers and how we need to understand their problems and drive solutions and services and new products that meet their problems and needs. And we'll talk about that in the next module. But for the moment, we can see straight away that digital technologies everywhere are transforming the way we work and live and operate as a society. In terms of the business model, if we think about the front stage, the value delivery, it transforms the way we interact with customers through apps, through mobiles, and our communication strategies. So the channels we use to reach customers, the way we deliver things, how we connect with people has changed radically, obviously, due to things like social media and the huge amount of technology involved in terms of the advertising on those platforms and the analytics platforms that we can use now. It also enables new forms of interaction. So you've got virtual reality, augmented reality, and increasingly these are going to come to the front as we think about how we design. So in terms of architecture, increasingly you'll have virtual design worlds where customers can walk through a completed building to experience it. And of course, automation transforms things. Customers now have things like chatbots that provide an element of service and interaction and communication on the front. In terms of backstage, though, it also changes how efficiencies are gained. Often tasks that were performed by people now are becoming increasingly automated. We have robotics increasingly coming into play, saving huge amounts of time. Factories that previously might have worked on shift hours, now with robots can work 24/7. And there's the data that all the technologies generate, which helps in terms of understanding performance, understanding how we can improve things. And it also helps us track items through distribution chains. And all these things tend to be driven in terms of platforms. So platforms and scalable solutions became a key part of digital business models. But it's not only that. If we actually look at how we pay for things now, we increasingly pay for things using our mobiles or digital devices, and the actual payment process is often seamless, done in seconds, as there are several integrations throughout the value chain. So the payment process itself, the way we see payments, the way we track payments, the visibility of how we pay, spend, what we spend, becomes much more accessible and easy to see. And those are all points in which we are transforming the way we work and live. This is an overview of some of the ways in which each of the business blocks are changed as a result of digital technologies. As you can see, there's a lot here, so I haven't got time to go through everything, but you can explore this and start to think about, for instance, if we take customer relationships, how digital technologies can personalize things like emails based on customer segments. You can actually put first names into an email as an automated thing. You can get real-time responses through chatbots. AI as a personal assistant is becoming more prevalent. And this transforms how customers expect their customer expectations. In terms of channels, we've also got things like augmented reality, multiple channels. In terms of customer segments, there's a merging of offline, online purchases and visibility of how we segment our customers. And all these things transform how businesses need to not only think about their customer segments, but the whole delivery of the relationships and the channels they use for sales and distribution. Equally, on terms of how we create value, there's this whole shift in the industries of increasingly using new dynamic infrastructures on a global basis that are based primarily on platforms. You've got things like digital twins, smart factories. Then in resources, you've got key resources that are becoming more and more essential to developing a competitive advantage in terms of how you use them. AI, for instance, how and what algorithms you use, algorithms that might be unique to your business. And it's also not just that, it's the activities themselves. So it's how you and what people and talent you use within your business. Do you have a good set of talent that can solve problems? How are you organising your workforce? How are you helping the transformation process? So that's just an overview. It's quite complicated and we haven't got time to go into it, but it gives you hopefully some thoughts. This is just some characteristics of some different types of digital business models. So in other words, this is how it enables, for instance, many-to-many communications. For instance, in terms of personalization, we know, for instance, that people like Nike now, you can go onto a Nike website and you can order a shoe, but then you can order it specifically to how you want it. In other words, what colors, might be what lace colors, and what other aspects of that product you want to do. In terms of digital offerings and revenue streams, you've got things like freemium, subscription, which are very hard to do in the physical world. In e-commerce, which has grown massively through examples like Amazon and eBay, then you've got licensing of code, so proprietary resources that are developed and then licensed, or even open source. Open source meaning code is accessible to everyone, and each groups and crowds of developers work together to improve it. And then in terms of distribution, you've got cloud distribution, and often that can be global. So how you distribute a digital product can go not just into one country, because there's no physical boundaries. You can actually distribute and sell products like Kindle ebooks globally very, very quickly. Platforms, as I've mentioned, are a key aspect of thinking about how you can use data, how you can build a unique value proposition in the marketplace. And it equally applies to physical products and how they're used and connect with customers. So there's an increasing market for scooters, and you probably know in your own way that there are scooters now that you can have an app for. You scan the QR code and then you can use it and get charged for the amount of time you're using it. And these scooters then are locked around different cities, and that becomes a form of transportation. That's a single-sided market, so to speak, or platform, in which you've got just one set of customers. Equally, you've got more complex platforms, often referred to as two-sided, and we mentioned that in terms of network effects. So if you look at Uber Rides needs to populate and gain enough drivers for it to appeal to the customers. So if you're in New York and there's only a few cars, the customers wouldn't use Uber. There wouldn't be enough reason. But as you populate the number of drivers, it becomes more appealing for the customers. So that's a two-sided market. Then you can move over to something like a three-sided market, where Uber is coordinating through Uber Eats multiple aspects. You've got people that will deliver, you've got the restaurant and you've got the customer. The restaurant is where people produce the food, customers then order the food, and then you have a further customer segment, which is those that deliver the food. Platforms, what are the benefits of platforms, and why is this huge movement towards platforms? Well, it's transparency of information for one. It's quick and easy to connect two sides of the market and understand how you can order things. It's quickly and easily scalable. Because it's digital, you can scale quite quickly exactly how you populate both sides of the market. And often it's subscription pricing, which means that you can actually use things on a regular basis and gain a forecastable set of revenue. Obviously, all of this relies on data sources. So in the case of the driver has a driver app, the customer has the app to order the ride, and then you can connect those two and they have visibility of each other. But it also makes the transactions seamless because they're all done within the app. There are lots of different types of platforms, and with the limited time we have, we can't go into all of them. So this is just an overview. Basically, you have marketplace platforms. Marketplaces are matching supply with demand. So in other words, people produce things and want to sell them, and then you've got people that want to buy them. And there's all sorts of different platforms. You've got platforms like Etsy, eBay, and even Amazon, which allows its own platform to have others, merchants, sell on its platforms. Then you have a capability platform. Now, capabilities can be quite interesting. They're normally things like software as a service companies. So you can get, for instance, on Google, you can install a tracker on your website, and what you can do then is see who comes to your website, how many people are visiting your website, what pages they click on, and so it provides a capability to actually understand from the data. You can learn a lot through the analytics. Not only that, some platforms give then, based on the data, the behaviors, some recommendations. So if you take Google Analytics, it starts to recommend to you some of the changes you might want to make. An orchestrator is interesting, and I'll touch upon this again within this module. So in construction, for instance, there is lots of heavy machinery, and owning or buying that, it involves a lot of investment and capital costs. So rather than owning it, what you might want to do is just rent it or lease it or buy it, use it for a short amount of time. Now, rather than be under contract with that, it's easier if a platform facilitates all those transactions, so it makes it super simple to actually do that. And even on things like heavy industry now, there are platforms that allow access to different types of resources and capital intensive infrastructure where you only pay on a usage basis. A good example of this, for instance, is 3D printing. Sometimes it can be very expensive to invest in different types of 3D printing based on the different materials that you might need. But there are now networks and platforms that allow you to get access to 3D printing and only pay for the usage. So you don't need to own it. You don't need to own the 3D printer. Let's take another look at some of a broader look at some of the platforms in the marketplace. So you have technology platforms. This is where developers build new services based on the code within the platforms. And it's basically like a Lego. So there's design libraries here, there's codes that are already built, and often what developers are doing is just building on a foundation, like bits of Lego, to build a final product. There's computing platforms or operating systems. There's utility platforms such as Google Search, and interaction networks like Facebook or social networks as we know them now. There's marketplaces, on-demand platforms, crowdsourcing platforms, where you can actually gain input from large numbers of people like Kickstarter does. So if you've got a new product that you want to launch into the marketplace, you can put it on Kickstarter, and then people will vote on it or fund it based on what they think of the idea. And of course, as we've mentioned earlier, data harvesting platforms that start to look at pulling in huge amounts of data that then people provide analytics and predictive analytics on top of. These are just some of the many ways in which platforms are changing industries. So as I said earlier, I'll explore a bit more this idea of assets and construction and how you can do them. So everything nowadays, a physical asset, rather than owning it, you can actually just use it and operate on a pay-per-use basis. And again, there's different types of business models involved here. We don't have time to go into all of them, but it hopefully will provoke some thought. As I said, there's e-commerce platforms, marketplaces, there's on-demand. So these are just some of the brand names that I wanted to put in place so that you can hopefully recognize some of these names or start to explore some of them in terms of how these platforms are working. So let's just do a recap of this module. The key points about using business model patterns is they are a great way to collaborate in teams to come up with new ideas once you've established some business models. They help you produce multiple business models that you can then assess. And there's no right way of doing this, but business model patterns provide a quick and easy way to challenge yourself in many of the different blocks within the business model canvas. In other words, how you put together and innovate a business model. You can use them to identify blueprints or transfer them quite easily, ideas from other industries. You can develop multiple business models and patterns, and you can develop your own library. And once you've developed some business models, don't forget that a good idea is to make sure you develop a library of them and tag them so that others can refer to them. We had that idea a year ago. Is it still relevant? Something might have changed. The market might have changed. So business models, even though they're not necessarily carried through, sometimes still have relevance. And there's a whole process around how you develop business models and store them and then tag them so that you can search for them on a regular basis and then reuse them. Consider the dominant business model patterns in your market. You find that most markets there is a dominant, like taxis were the dominant way of people hailing rides. And that taxi market had a dominant pattern that you could actually put into a business model canvas. Then the question becomes, how could we change it? How could we innovate? How can we change the delivery? How can we change how people pay? How can we change from owning cars to just using drivers? That was the thought process that business model patterns helps you go through. So that's just a bit of a recap and some points to think about. In terms of digital, consider which business model patterns work better as a result of digital technologies. So as an example, subscription models become a lot easier because of the automation that you can put in place with payments. And multi-sided platforms. If you're trying to connect two sides of a market, then platforms become and help people with transparency. In other words, they can help people find each other and then interact and transact. So for each block in the business model canvas, the question to ask is, how can digital technologies transform that block, make it more efficient, automated, faster, more effective? And how are the competition using it in their own business models? Developing a business model isn't just about developing your own idea. You need to take a much broader stance, develop multiple business models, understand the market, understand the customer, and really challenge the business model. Make sure that when you get to the final few that you really want to take forward as business ideas, that you've fully understood them, that there is a logic to them as to how you protect them, why they give you a competitive advantage, and why a customer would want to buy your value proposition. Thank you very much.